Avanti West Coast is the principal operator on Britain's West Coast main line, serving destinations such as Manchester, Birmingham and beyond from London. However, recent reports of quote unofficial strike action have led to Avanti West Coast introducing a reduced timetable, causing much misery for passengers. To counteract this and to provide competition to Avanti's existing services, Locomotive Services Limited, under their Intercity brand, have introduced a special Friday charter service to Manchester via Birmingham along the West Coast main line. And at the bargain price of £75 one way for a first class single, I just had to check it out for myself and see what it was like. And on that note, it's now time for us to get the show on the rails and head to Manchester. Our journey today begins from Euston Station, located in central London, which is located just up the road from King's Cross and St Pancras International stations. Euston Station is the southern terminus of the West Coast main line, arguably Britain's busiest main line, which serves the key cities of Birmingham, Manchester and Glasgow from London. Euston was the first intercity railway terminal in London, having been built in 1837. And to this day is the busiest intercity terminal in the UK. This can not only be evidenced from the huge crowds of people outside of the station, but also inside the station as well, all of whom have been impacted by the Avanti West Coast crisis. This event triggered the introduction of the Friday Charter, but before I go into more detail about this, we can admire the impressive interior architecture, which I find to be much better than the exterior of the station. I'm on the second level of Euston Station, which, as with the first level, includes plenty of restaurants and shops to prepare you for your onward journey. It also includes the first class lounge for first class ticket holders. Our Friday charter service today is the 1742 departure to Manchester Piccadilly. The Friday charter service runs non-stop to Birmingham International, and after which calls at principal stations along the West Coast main line, all the way to Manchester Piccadilly. The Friday charter service operates in two halves. The first one is from Crewe to London Euston, and the second service is from London Euston all the way to Manchester Piccadilly via Crewe and Birmingham New Street. Having completed its journey from Crewe, our Friday charter service is resting at platform 16, ready to head back up north to Manchester. In full view can be seen the Mark III coaching stock and Mark III driving van trailer. Also seen is famous TikTok star Francis Bourgeois, who is seen recording one of his latest videos. Wonder if I made the final cut. At the front of the train is one of two Class 90 locomotives which LSL own and operate on the Friday charter. A Class 87 which they own can also be used. The Class 90 dates from the late 1980s, whereas the Mark III coaching stock dates from the late 1970s, both of which have been restored to the stunning Intercity Swallow livery. Our locomotive is named the Wolf of Badenoch, after the late Alexander Stewart, the Earl of Buchan. It's now time for us to take a look inside of the train, and this gives me the perfect opportunity to use the slam doors on the Mark III coaching stock, something I haven't done on the main line for over a year and a half. Many users of Greater Anglia before the pandemic began may recognise the interior of the train. This is because the coaching stock used is the ex-Intercity stock that was used on the London to Norwich route. Having been made redundant by Greater Anglia upon the introduction of the Class 745 flirt trains, Locomotive Services Limited took them on and refurbished them for their intercity services, although much of it is still the same from when they came over from Greater Anglia. Nevertheless, the 2+1 configuration in first class and the Intercity 70 seats do the job very much nicely. A few of the changes that I've noticed with the interior are the glass screens introduced as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the portraits on the walls depicting LSL's various heritage stock. Our train today is 9 carriages in length, and in the final carriage is a wheelchair accessible toilet specifically for those with reduced mobility. I think my one disappointment with this part of the train is to be greeted to similar seats as South Eastern's Class 376 trains, arguably one of the worst trains in Britain. I've decided to base myself in the very front carriage of the train, but before we head off, and as I take my seat, it's time for me to go through our route for today. Starting from Euston Station, we work our way up the main stretch of the West Coast main line, skipping principal stations such as Watford and Milton Keynes. Following this, we then split from the Northampton Loop up the Long Buckby Wharf to pass through Rugby, in Warwickshire and the West Midlands. We then pass through Coventry before reaching our first stop of Birmingham International. A mere 10 minutes later, we arrive into our second stop of Birmingham New Street, and then pass through and arrive at Wolverhampton, Stafford, and up the main stretch of the West Coast Main Line to Crewe, and then on to Wilmslow, and finally Manchester Piccadilly. Our expected arrival time into Manchester this evening is around 9:15, meaning we have over 3.5 hours of classic traction fun up the West Coast Main Line to Manchester this evening. So, I believe now it's time for us to head off on the Iron Road. So, let's roll and head to Manchester. As we prepare to leave the Greater London boundary, we can see the Royal Mail's Willesden parcel depot in the background, which is not only the base for its road-based operations, but its rail ones as well. The main attraction, however, is the world-famous Wembley Stadium, which can be seen as we approach the northern London suburb. Wembley Intercity depot can also be seen in the background. While storage and maintenance is the principal activities conducted in the depot is also used for the testing and commissioning of new stock, as can be seen in the background with the C2C Class 720. The Class 90 locomotive that's hauling our set now was designed specifically for West Coast mainline work back in the late 1980s and early 90s. As such, the maximum speed of this locomotive is 110 miles an hour, which we're experiencing right now as we thunder through Watford Junction Station, a major hub on the West Coast Main Line, which Avanti operates on a pick-up and drop-off only basis. On that note, I feel like now's the time for a Know Your Seat, to get a look at the train a bit more, as well as its features. The seats are the Intercity 70 seats, which, as the name suggests, date back to the late 1970s when the carriages were built. I really do find them plush and comfortable, amongst some of the best in the UK. The armrests don't move, however, which I find is a major flaw in the design. As to be expected from a luxury product, the legroom is incredibly generous, although I can imagine this would have been a lot worse had somebody been sitting opposite me, which fortunately wasn't the case today. As I touched upon briefly earlier, much of the train's interior is still the same as when they were with Greater Anglia, and this includes the seat numbers. This came in handy when enforcing the mandatory seat reservation policy on the trip, although, a word of warning, once you choose your seat, you're stuck in it for the remainder of your journey, so do choose wisely to avoid any regrets later on. Another advertised benefit with the Friday Charter is the provision of at-seat power sockets. To operate these, just flick the switch on and off as you would do in your normal household. The same also applies with the reading lights located just above the seat, although these are quite difficult to reach, as is a flaw with many UK trains. Located just above these is an overhead luggage rack, which as can be seen was very well used, even more so than the luggage racks provided located near the vestibules. As with many features of this train, they are retained from when they were built in the 1970s, and that includes the operational curtains to block out the views when necessary, although the West Coast Main Line has many countryside views, so many so that it would be rude to do so. Passing the Linslade curve highlights why non-tilting trains, unlike Avanti's Pendolino and Super Voyager fleets, are unable to reach the line's top speed of 125 miles an hour, and this is excluding the fact that the Class 90 is capped at 110 mile an hour speed limit. Although there are works undergoing on the West Coast Main Line to eventually in the future enable non-tilting trains to reach the line's top speed of 125 miles an hour. Something I always find myself highlighting when I'm on the West Coast is the progress of the East-West Rail link at Bletchley, which will eventually link Cambridge, Bedford and Oxford via the former Varsity line. The link to the Marston Vale line to Bedford, as well as Bletchley sidings, where London North Western Railway stable their electric trains overnight, can also be seen. We also find ourselves passing through Milton Keynes Central, a major hub on the West Coast Main Line for both LNR and Avanti West Coast services. The largest settlement in Buckinghamshire, it recently gained city status in 2022. It was also formerly served by Southern services to East Croydon via the West London line until the services ceased in May 2022. I must admit that this is definitely one of my favourite clips of the video, as it's not every day that you pass through some newly manufactured cars being hauled on the railways. Well, that's one way to get people off the roads and onto the rails, wouldn't you say? No? Okay, I'll take my coat. For now, let's just enjoy how satisfying this is. Right, I feel like now's a better time than ever to check out the catering options on board. Catering is available on the train in the form of a buffet car. Not only are you allowed to purchase alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks, there are also a various amount of snacks, sandwiches and other refreshments available. Do feel free to pause if you would like to read the menu further. I did use this opportunity to buy a few snacks on board the train, and even then, despite the fact this isn't really that much food, I still ended up paying £5 for this. Yikes, especially as it's a first class offering, so I would have hoped there would have been some complimentary catering. But you can't have everything in life. I also used the opportunity to check out one of the new accessible toilets on the Mark III carriages, which isn't a common feature considering most were withdrawn by the end of 2019 due to their inability to meet the PRM requirement. Door locked, and we can begin. My initial impressions are that I'm really impressed with the cleanliness of the toilet, as this is something that is a key factor for me in terms of my toilet reviews. I must admit that I'm a big fan of the baby change facilities, mostly because they don't knock down the toilet lid as you pull it down. As for the taps, whilst there aren't any soap dispensers, there are bottles of hand wash located next to the sink. The tap also flows relatively well, and there is a bottle of hand sanitizer to the right should you choose to use it instead. And given the train's age, there are no hand dryers located, instead paper towel dispensers, but overall it's a big thumbs up from me. As I was heading back to my seat, I noticed that there was a bottle of hand sanitizer located straight outside of the toilet door, which, to be honest, I wasn't really expecting, considering how the UK is pretty much ignoring COVID regulations nowadays. Something that took me by surprise when I was looking at booking this train is that we actually skip Coventry Station, which is normally a major station hub on the Birmingham to London route, and as such that made skipping it just as much more satisfying. Coventry was the UK's City of Culture for 2021, until it relinquished this title in the 31st of May 2022. To the right can be seen the branch off towards Nuneaton and the Trent Valley line. The sight of Resorts World Birmingham and the National Exhibition Centre can only mean that we are on the approach to our first stop, which is Birmingham International. Whilst the station does serve the National Exhibition Centre and the Resorts World, it principally serves Birmingham International Airport, with the Air Rail Link monorail system located just outside of the main station concourse, transporting passengers between here and the airport. Another point to note is that fares on the Friday charter from Birmingham International onwards to Birmingham New Street and Manchester Piccadilly are £50 one way, which, for a 10-minute journey between here and Birmingham, does seem a bit extortionate. Around 10 minutes later, we can now be seen arriving into Birmingham city centre on the approach to our second stop of Birmingham New Street. Whilst doing so, we have a good view of the HS2 works that are currently being underdone for the Birmingham Curzon Street station, expected to open in 2026. We also have a good vantage point of the former station entrance that used to reside here. Having stood here since 1838 when it was first built, it is now a Grade 1 listed building and is expected to form an integral part of the new station when it opens in 2026 as its eastern entrance. Looking on to the left, we can also be seen passing a cross-country HST set, which is a train of a similar age to the one we're on now, and really is the definition of a Back to the Future scenario from the 1990s in 2022. Birmingham New Street is our second stop of the trip, and is the principal station serving the UK's second largest city of Birmingham. The station recently underwent a major refurbishment which was completed in 2015 that saw the addition of the Grand Central Shopping Centre that can be seen just above us. As the UK's fifth busiest station and the busiest station outside of London, Birmingham New Street is a central hub for many services across the country, particularly London North Western Railway and West Midlands Railway services, as well as cross-country and Avanti West Coast, the former of which all services either call or terminate at this station. Under normal circumstances, we would have a 5-minute wait here. However, we did arrive a few minutes late, so this wasn't possible today. We now find ourselves running up the Stour Valley Line branch of the West Coast Main Line between Birmingham and Stafford. In doing so, we run across the northern portion of the Grand Union Canal between Birmingham and Worcester. As well as being greeted by a gorgeous sunset, we also pass Soho Depot, which is where West Midlands Railway maintain their fleet of Class 323 trains. It's also worth giving a shout out to Hunslet the Bear, the depot's mascot. On the approach to our next stop of Wolverhampton, we find ourselves passing over the former GWR route between Wolverhampton Low Level and Birmingham Snow Hill, which has not seen a passenger service since 1972, in favour of the High Level station which we're approaching now. A London North Western Railway local service, operated by West Midlands Railway, can be seen to the left. Other services here include Avanti West Coast and cross-country up the West Coast Main Line, as well as Transport for Wales services to Shrewsbury and Mid Wales. As dusk draws near to close the day, we are now approaching our next stop of Stafford, which is a major hub on the West Coast Main Line, as this is where many branches of the West Coast link to go to all destinations, such as Crewe, Liverpool and Glasgow. Many passengers, including myself, took advantage of the 10-minute layover here and got out to stretch our legs. It's also worth noting that some enthusiasts even managed to get pictures inside of the cab of the Class 90 locomotive, which was pretty cool. The route between Stafford and Crewe does have a bit of an oddity, which is Norton Bridge Station that we've just passed. The station officially lost its services in 2004, however, was listed as a station until 2017 when it officially closed. Consequently, unless the route is taken via Stoke-on-Trent, there are no in-between stations between the principal route between Crewe and Stafford. As we approach Crewe, which is often dubbed as the centre of the UK's rail network due to the various workings that go on here, we can now see a Transport for Wales loco haul set which operates their Premier service, which I will be having a look at sometime soon, so do subscribe so you don't miss the video. We can also see Merseyrail's new Class 777 trains, all of which are stored at Arriva Train Care Crewe. Locomotive Services Limited's base can be seen to the left, where they store all their heritage stocks, including their HST sets, as well as the Class 90 and Mark III set that we're on right now. Crewe is also home to the Crewe Heritage Centre, which, as a rail enthusiast, I really must visit someday. From Crewe, we now only have 2 stops before we reach our final destination of Manchester Piccadilly this evening. Our penultimate stop this evening is Wilmslow, a market town and civil parish in Cheshire. From here, it's around a 20-minute journey until we arrive in our final stop of Manchester this evening. From here, you can alight for northern services for local services throughout the northwest of England, including to Manchester Airport. It's also worth noting that from here, the service is £10 between here and Manchester. The layover here was around 6 to 7 minutes, and consequently, I alighted from the train and used the opportunity to get a few photos. And considering there weren't that many people in the way, I think I did quite well, especially due to the fact that nighttime photography is one of my weak points. Anyways, I feel like now's the time for us to head back to Manchester. Well, after the staff finish having their photo taken, that is. In yet another satisfying moment of the trip, we find ourselves passing through Stockport Station, and much like Coventry, this station rarely sees many passenger services skipping through it. Located in Greater Manchester, the town is located approximately a 10-minute train ride from Manchester. And carrying us over the town is the Stockport Viaduct, one of the UK's largest brick structures and a major structure of the early railway age, having been built in 1839. A Grade 2 listed viaduct, it really does provide epic views of the town itself as we cross over the M60 motorway and the River Mersey. The view is made even more stunning by the fact that we're crossing it at night, and it really does look absolutely astounding. It's now time for a conclusion. Overall, I have to admit I was pleasantly surprised with LSL's Friday charter service. The product is solid, the staff are incredibly professional and nice, and not to mention the fact that the stock is the best part about it. Not only is it very well maintained and clean throughout, and relatively reliable compared to Avanti's modern offerings. Being one of the Mark III carriages, the riding quality is absolutely superb, the seats are really comfortable, and not only that, but the ambience and general vibes on the trip were absolutely fantastic. As we pass through Alstom's Longsight Depot, where Avanti's Pendolino fleet is maintained, it's worth noting that the Friday charter came about through LSL bidding for one of Avanti's redundant paths on the West Coast main line, and there's also mentioning of LSL bidding for more paths, as well as helping out the West Coast main line in times of need. Times of need, you ask? You'll find out what that is in a future video, so do subscribe so you don't miss out. I would have to say though that the downside of the trip is that I honestly feel like a lot more could have been provided for the amount I paid, as there wasn't any complimentary catering on board, and not to mention that the price is fixed between London and wherever you end up stopping off. So, say you stop at Birmingham International for example, you'll still end up paying £75 as opposed to say £50. So it does seem a bit extortionate in that sense. Anyways guys, I believe that's it from me. So, as the night draws to a close, it's time to welcome you to Manchester. And we arrive into Manchester, back to the future style, even though we do end up a couple of minutes late. I think one of my final thoughts on the service were that not only was it good to see many enthusiasts on board the train, but also non-enthusiasts as well, as it really does show that rail travel in the UK is starting to claw back up after the COVID-19 pandemic. As we open the door and alight from the platform, I really would like to thank you for coming along with me on this ride today. If you did enjoy the video, please do give it a like as well as share it, as that really does help the channel to grow. If you're new to the channel and want to see more content such as this, why not consider subscribing as well as enabling notifications, as I'm now publishing new videos every Friday at 5 PM. Well, as much as I'd love to stay and admire the impressive Class 90 locomotive, I really do have to head off, as I do have a connection to Liverpool in approximately 30 seconds actually. And here it comes to the left, just having arrived from Manchester Airport. But as I quickly hop on, I'd just like to say, take care guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next Friday at 5 PM. Goodbye.
See you later.